Hi everyone, my name's Kyle Simon. I'm the owner of Breakthru Tutoring. I specialize in helping students from the age of about 6th grade all the way up through senior year in developing their fundamental math skills and then using those skills to help prep for the college admissions tests like the ACT and the SAT. Now, in my last video, I talked about how one of the main issues that students have with math is that they don't have their fundamental math skills put together, and more specifically, their arithmetic skills put together. So if your student is struggling with just basic arithmetic, putting together positive and negative integers, go ahead and check out my last video. But in this video, we're going to be taking it a step further and looking at arithmetic with fractions. Now, when we look at fractions, there's going to be a few different things that we need to make sure of, especially when we're going ahead and looking at addition and subtraction. So let's go ahead and talk about trying to put two fractions together using addition. So for instance, if we were looking at the problem 2/3 plus 4/3, we can see here that we have a common denominator, and the denominator is just the bottom number, and we call the top numbers the numerators. So in this case, since the denominator is the same, we're going to go ahead and keep the denominator. Now on the top here, we want to go ahead and add our numerators. So this is where the arithmetic comes in from our last video. We see here that we have a positive 2 plus 4. So both signs are the same here, so we go ahead and put 2 and 4 together, which is 6. We know that we're going to keep the sign, which is positive. And we all know that positive 6 divided by a positive 3 will give us a positive 2. Let's try another one. If we had 1/5 plus, let's say, 4/5. Here again we have a common denominator of 5, so we'll keep the 5 on the bottom in the denominator spot. And we have a positive 1 plus 4. If we put 1 and 4 together, we get 5, keep the sign, which is positive. And we can see here that positive 5 divided by positive 5 will give us a positive 1. Let's go ahead and look at some subtraction problems here using common denominators. If we had 3/4 minus 5/4, we can see here that we still have a common denominator, which is 4. And now we have a positive 3 minus 5. So we want to think back to our arithmetic and think, okay, these signs are different. So we want to take the larger number by kind of ignoring the signs first. Take the larger number. 5 minus 3 is 2. And since the 5 is the larger number in this case, we want to keep the sign, which is negative. And we can see here that if we divide both the top and the bottom by 2, negative 2 divided by 2 will leave us with a negative 1, and 4 divided by 2 will leave us with a 2, so our final answer is negative 1/2. So now let's talk about, well, what happens if the denominators are not the same? Well, if the denominators aren't the same, similar to 2/3 plus 1/4, here's the trick that I usually tell students to try. We have to get a number here on the bottom that works. So my small trick is to say 3 times 4 is 12. And now we're just going to look across here. 2 times 4 is 8. And 3 times 1 is 3. When we add the numbers on the top in the numerator slot, 8 plus 3 is 11 over 12. Let's try another one. 2/5 plus 3/4. Again, we don't have a common denominator, but if we use this trick, 5 times 4 is going to give us 20. And now we just cross. 2 times 4 is again 8. And 5 times 3 is 15. When we go ahead and add 8 plus 15, we're going to see that we're going to get a number of 23 over 20. If your teacher wanted you to change this into a mixed number, we can say that, well, 20 goes into 23 one whole time, and from 20 to get to 23 is 3 units. Now we always leave that over the denominator that is already there. So this would be 1 and 3/20. Now what happens if we have subtraction? Maybe we have 3/5 minus 1/6. Does this trick still work with subtraction? And it does. If we go ahead and multiply 5 times 6, we kind of assume that the negative is just on the top number here with the 1. So we get a 30 on the bottom. And here we're going to cross and say 3 times 6 is 18. And now since we kind of went ahead and put the negative up on top, 5 times negative 1 will be minus 5. If we do our arithmetic on the top, we're going to see that 18 minus 5 will give us 13 over 30, which is our final answer. Now that we've addressed addition and subtraction, let's go ahead and talk about multiplication. Now you might think that multiplication and division might be a little bit more challenging, but in this case with fractions, it's actually easier. If we look at the problem 3/4 times 1/2, with multiplication, all we have to think is that we need to multiply across. So 3 times 1 is 3, and 4 times 2 is 8. Pretty simple. Let's take a look at another one. 5/6 times 2/3. Again, we're just going to multiply across. 5 times 2 will give us 10, and 6 times 3 will give us 18. We can see here that this fraction will be able to be reduced because 2 can go into each number. So 10 divided by 2 will give us 5, and 18 divided by 2 will give us a final answer of 5/9. Now, let's go ahead and look at a multiplication problem with some negatives in it. If we had negative 2/5 times a positive 1/6, again, I always just put the negative on the top number. So when we multiply across, negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, and 5 times 6 will be 30. Again, we can reduce this. We can divide each piece by 2. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, and 30 divided by 2 will give us 15. If we had an expression with two negatives, something like maybe negative 3/4 times negative 1/5, we know that when we multiply two negative numbers together, we get a positive. So negative 3 times negative 1 would be a positive 3, and 4 times 5 would be 20. So this final answer would be positive. And finally, guys, we have to talk about division. What happens when we have something like 2/5 being divided by 1/3? Well, right now it's hard to see, but we know that multiplication is pretty easy. So we're going to talk about how can we rewrite this division problem in a way that puts it into multiplication. And here's what I want you to remember. Keep, change, flip. So what does this mean? Well, the first thing we're going to do is keep the first fraction the same. So we have 2/5. We're going to go ahead and change our division sign into multiplication, and then we're going to flip or invert the second fraction. So instead of writing 1/3, we're going to flip it, 3/1. And now that we have a multiplication problem, we know that we just multiply across. 2 times 3 is going to give us 6, and 5 times 1 will be 5. Let's try another one. Let's say that it was 1/4 divided by 2/3. Well, if we do the same thing, we keep the first fraction, which is 1/4, we change to multiplication, and then we flip the second fraction. 1 times 3 will be 3, 4 times 2 will be 8. Now here we're using the actual division sign to show this operation, but another way that a division problem could be written is something like this. 4/5 is being divided by 3/1. So we could do the same thing, keep the top fraction, 4/5, change to multiplication, and now we flip the bottom fraction, 1/3. 4 times 1 will be 4, and 5 times 3 is going to be 15. So guys, what we are doing is we're trying to develop habits. We're trying to look at certain cues in math so that we can run a particular program and increase your odds of getting the correct answer out. Usually students have a multitude of different ways of solving the exact same style problem, which leads to inconsistency and errors. So as we go forward into our math, we want to build a solid math foundation that has rules, that has structure, that has habits, so that as you move into your higher level math classes, you're going to feel very confident in those skills, in knowing that even though you're doing higher level concepts, it's always going to work down to your arithmetic with integers, or in this case, with fractions. If, as a parent, you're interested in any academic coaching via online tutoring or in-person tutoring, please reach out to me via my website at breakthrututoring.com, and we can set up a phone consultation and see what we can do for your individual student. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.